All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. Today, we're diving into something I think is really fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a hot button issue.
Yeah.
It's about Bitcoin and its relationship to climate change.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area. Lots of debate.
For sure, for sure. So you sent over an article about
Yeah.
this, and to be honest, I was a little skeptical when I first saw the title.
Yeah, I get that.
It's not exactly the first thing you think of. Bitcoin is like a climate hero, right?
No, not typically. But this article makes a pretty compelling case, I think.
It does, it does. It kind of flips the script on how we usually think about Bitcoin.
Exactly. It really digs into how Bitcoin mining, when done strategically, can actually be a positive
Like
force.
to actually help the environment.
Yeah, like actually
Yeah.
contribute to renewable energy growth,
Yeah.
reduce emissions, even help stabilize the power grid.
Okay, see, that's where I get a little lost.
Yeah.
Because, like, the whole point of Bitcoin mining is to solve complex math problems,
All
right?
right.
Which takes a ton of computing power.
Lots of energy.
Yeah, so how does that translate into being good for the environment?
Well, the article really focuses on this idea of wasted energy. So you know how renewable sources like wind and solar, they're not always consistent.
Right, sometimes the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining.
Exactly. And when they are generating power, sometimes they produce more than the grid can actually use at that moment.
And so that extra energy, it just...
It often gets wasted, unfortunately. But here's where Bitcoin mining can come in. Those mining operations, they can use that surplus energy.
So instead of it just disappearing, it's actually put to good use.
Right. And that turns what's essentially a problem for renewable energy providers into a source of revenue.
So it's like win-win. The miners get cheap energy, and the renewable energy companies, they have a way to make money off of that excess power.
Exactly. And that can make investing in renewable energy projects more attractive overall, which could speed up the transition away from fossil fuels.
Okay, that part makes sense. But the article also talked about something called demand response and how Bitcoin miners play a role in that. What is that exactly?
So think of Bitcoin miners as really flexible energy consumers. They can quickly ramp their energy use up or down as needed.
So it's not like a factory where
Uh,
they need a constant stream of power 24/7.
Exactly. And that flexibility is super valuable for grid operators who are always trying to balance supply and demand.
So like if there's a sudden spike in demand, say a heat wave hits and everyone's cranking their ACs, the miners can just dial back their energy use to free up power for the grid.
Right. And conversely, when demand is low, they can ramp up their operations to make use of that available energy.
Huh, interesting. The article mentioned an example of this happening during that massive winter storm in Texas back in 2021, right?
Okay, Winter Storm Elliott. Bitcoin miners actually provided 1.7 gigawatts of energy back to the grid during that crisis,
Which is enough to power.
enough to power something like 1.7 million homes.
Wow, that's huge. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's pretty impressive. But this is where I think things get really mind-blowing. The article talks about how Bitcoin mining could actually reduce methane emissions,
Yeah. Now that's where things get exciting. The key here is methane.
which, just to remind everyone, is a way more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide.
Much more potent, like way worse for the climate.
And it's often just released into the atmosphere, right?
Yeah, from landfills, abandoned oil wells, agricultural operations. It's a big problem.
Okay, but I still don't see the connection to Bitcoin mining.
So the idea is that you strategically locate Bitcoin mining operations near these methane sources.
Yep.
And instead of letting that methane escape into the atmosphere, you capture it and use it to power the mining process.
Ah, so you're essentially turning a harmful waste product into something useful.
Precisely. And the article suggests that if this practice becomes widespread, it could actually make the Bitcoin network carbon negative.
Meaning it would actually remove more carbon from the atmosphere than it emits.
Exactly. Which would be, a pretty huge deal.
That would be incredible. Okay, so there's the environmental side of things, but the article also touched on Bitcoin's potential to promote financial inclusion, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, it's another big part of the argument. Because Bitcoin is decentralized, it doesn't rely on traditional banking systems.
So people who don't have access to banks, like in developing countries or underserved communities,
Exactly. They can still participate in the global economy using Bitcoin.
the article mentioned a pretty shocking statistic, didn't it? About how many people globally lack access to basic financial services.
It's a staggering number, yeah. Something like 1.7 billion adults worldwide.
Wow,
Yeah.
so Bitcoin could be a real game changer for those folks.
Absolutely. It could give them opportunities to save, invest, build businesses, all sorts of things.
Okay, so we've talked about all these potential upsides, but obviously we can't ignore the concerns about Bitcoin's energy consumption. I mean, it does take a lot of power to run those mining operations.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Those concerns are valid, and the article acknowledges that.
So how does it address those criticisms?
It argues that the potential benefits, especially if the industry shifts toward renewables and those methane mitigation strategies, could outweigh the costs.
So it's not about ignoring the problem, it's about finding ways to make the network more sustainable.
Exactly.
Okay, so after this deep dive, I'm definitely seeing Bitcoin in a new light.
Yeah, it's a lot more nuanced than people often realize.
So what's the big takeaway here? Is Bitcoin a climate villain, a potential hero, or something in between?
I think that's the question we all need to be asking. The article really pushes us to move beyond those simple headlines and really consider the complexity of this issue.
Yeah, it's not black and white, that's for sure. What really stuck with me is this idea of Bitcoin mining as a tool for grid stability, especially with all the challenges we're facing with climate change and extreme weather events.
Yeah, that's definitely an area where there's a lot of potential for innovation. As we transition to more renewable energy, we need to figure out how to manage those resources effectively.
Absolutely. Well, this deep dive has definitely been eye-opening for me. I'm curious to hear what our listeners think about all this.
Yeah, me too.
So for those of you tuning in, we want to hear from you. Is Bitcoin a climate hero in disguise? Or is it still a major environmental threat? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
And keep the conversation going.
Until next time.
See ya. Bye.